All right, what a wonderful way to end the season. It's just lovely race. You know what my favorite thing was, Kyle? No controversy. No controversy at all.
We wouldn't be back if it was, we're back because it was so boring that we thought we've got to have, you need someone to watch. No one else is producing content. They're all, media's gone home, early Christmas, too boring.
It's just your typical Abu Dhabi race at the end of the year,
Yeah.
So, hello, we're back. Little earlier than maybe we anticipated, but we couldn't not talk about this one. I want to preface this. I don't know how many people will get viewing this, but I'll start by saying, for the love of God, keep it civil, please. I guess we'll start by just sort of we'll break down what happened in the race, and then we'll get into, I guess, some of the talking points that everyone's going and what our thoughts are. We've got some viewer questions. I say viewer questions, they're our friends, but they're viewers as well.
They're viewers, so, they count.
Abu Dhabi race, Max and Lewis completely tied on points. Insane that it even got to the point where they were at, 359.5 or something.
I love that it was
like
a 0.5 as well. Even if if you had no context, this was your first race, you'd be like, oh, they're both equal and on 0.5. Okay.
Yeah, even going into the last race, even on points, like we haven't seen that in a long, long time, especially with the point system the way it is now. Like, I don't know if it'll ever happen again. It's kind of insane. But basically, Max put his Red Bull on pole, much to the amazement of myself and lots of other people.
And he didn't just put it on pole. He didn't just put it on pole. He put it on
You're
pole.
a bit excited there. He's regressing to his teenage years. Oh, he put it on pole.
It was...
it was like 3/10 or something, which is insane. He saved, I think he said it was like 7/10 on his Q2 lap.
Yeah, it was a lot.
It was a mega lap. Max had to qualify on the softs because he flat spotted his mediums in Q2, so had to go out on the softs to so he wouldn't start on those medium tires to do a better lap. So we'd start on those soft tires. Hamilton started on the mediums, which was the preferred strategy. So it was, going into it, there was everything to be excited for. Max P1 on the unfavored strategy, Lewis P2 on the favored strategy. What would happen? Race came around, Lewis got away way better than Max. Max had the last few races he's had some pretty poor starts. I don't know if that's down to him.
It wasn't even that like Lewis got away decent, but everyone else got away well compared to Max as well. Max just had a shocker of a start, which they used to be pretty well known for that. Well, I guess since the Webber days, he pulled a Webber, really. If you remember, Webber used to be a shocker for race starts. He would always be at the front and always 2-3 places every race he'd fall back. So maybe Mark spoke to him before the race and they went, oh, no, get him away!
No. So Hamilton gets out and Max tries to overtake in turn 6, and we have our first contentious issue, which is Lewis cutting the corner with Max diving down the inside of turn 6. He did make the corner. Lewis had to back out and he cut across the corner, and it was deemed that he did not have to give the place back, but the stewards deemed he gave enough of his time back that he lost. Which I don't know that I agree with, considering they were literally like side by side into the corner, and they come out of the corner and Lewis is like 2 seconds up the road, and it's like, I don't know about that, but whatever. Compared to the rest of the stuff that happens, do we even?
It was still an interesting start. How even from the get go we had controversy and one side of the camp and going, oh, bias, and Twitter going, oh, bias, and the other side going, oh, no, but this is what he's always done, and they're finally taking a proper stance on it. So what better way to start it all, really? It couldn't have started any other way. But it was interesting how he did send it, and we all knew he was going to send it. But in the last few races, whenever he sent it like that, they both went off. But the fact that Max actually stayed in the track, you almost assumed when you saw it live, you went, oh, well, Lewis is going to be able to keep it because they both went off.
Yeah.
And then you saw the replay, and you're like, oh, Max stayed in. You're like, oh, good on him. Hey, he did it for once. But then
I watching his onboard, I have zero idea how he slowed.
It was insane. It was Ricardo was in that car for sure. They would have subbed for a lap. And
I'm a bit sort of torn on that one. At the time, I thought it was fine for Hamilton to keep his place out in front. Max lunged from a long way back, and Hamilton was actually turning into the apex before Max was even like alongside Hamilton. So like he was turning in, and he's just like oops straight through as he's turning in. So like Lewis didn't really have a choice but to back out of it.
Yeah.
But also the fact that Max made the corner is kind of, I guess, grounds for you could argue, he would have to give that place back. I kind of see it both ways.
I think the thing that most people, I think, said afterwards was if it was any other driver in that scenario making the move, they probably would have said give it back. But because it was Max, and probably because of all the... Even, they even called let the top two race, right? And normally it's the other way around, but instead this case they went, no, it is Max and Lewis, let's just leave it be, you know what I mean? And as they said, throughout the rest of that lap, Lewis did back off a bit into where Max was about, I think it was the closest, like a second or something behind. So it did shrink a second over that last sector. So Hamilton recognized, look, immediately he knew he did something cheeky. He backed off to show the stewards, yes, I'm not trying to run away with this or argue it. I'm aware what just happened, but, and I think the stewards from that went, that's fair enough. They're now close enough to each other where it's kind of equaled out. We're not, there's no, they probably thought the smallest amount of actions they could take at that point, the stewards, let's just take as little actions as possible and let them sort it out on the track, so.
Yeah, that went well, didn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
At this stage, we're talking every 10 minutes. The context
turn
changed,
one,
right?
Turn one. Yeah. It was pretty clear that Hamilton was sort of running away from Max, running away with the race. Extends his lead to like 5 seconds on those mediums. Max drops way back on pace on those softs. Like by lap 9, I think he's saying the rears are starting to go. He's not going to last much longer on those. I think lap 15 or so, Max comes into the pits. Lewis comes to the next lap to cover him off. You think, oh good, this is how it's going to end. A very Abu Dhabi like. They left Perez out.
Knight in shining armor was still out there. You looked at that track map and you went, who's that man on the old tyres out there running around in purple?
I saw them go for that strategy, and I was like, I was pretty dismissive of it, because the way Hamilton was catching Checo, I'm sitting there like, he's just gonna get past him on the straight. He's just gonna fly past him.
Yeah.
He's not gonna be able to even try and put up a defense. And come lap 20, how wrong I was. That was some like heroic defense from Perez.
It was probably the most amazing defense there's ever been. Without even, it was an amazing defense, but you can't call any of it dirty. It was like the cleanest,
that's the thing. It was
clean. It was beautiful and clean
legal,
racing, and yet it, that's what was magical about
I think it was like Max was 6.5 seconds behind Lewis, and in the space of one lap, Checo held him up for one lap, and he was like a 1.5 seconds behind.
Yeah.
By the time, and then obviously Perez pulls off to the side, Max goes through, and at that point you're thinking, oh my god, Checo, you're
after
a hero.
He gives Max a cheeky bit of DRS as well, just the icing on the cake as Max catches up enough to get DRS. It just closes that little bit more as well.
And then Lewis went and he fucked off out ahead again. So Giovinazzi pulls over to the side. Well, he pulls over to the side, so he must have had an issue of some kind. But he pulls over next to like a service entrance. Lap 35, virtual safety car comes out. Lewis stays out to keep track position. Max just has to do the opposite of what Lewis does. Lewis stays out because, track position is historically
and
important.
And they know that he's
got
good pace, so...
Yes. Yeah, and then Max pits, gets a cheap pit stop, comes out. He's 17 seconds, I think, behind Lewis on fresh tyres, and Lewis is on, 20-lap-old hards. Once the VSC goes away, Max does start gaining. I think he needed 8/10 a lap. Which he started. He started getting 8/10 a lap, and then it started up slower. It's then it's 6/10 and 5/10 and 4/10 and 2/10, and you're thinking, oh, it was a good idea, but yeah, just not
it's
quite
not working
enough.
And there was still almost a little bit of hope because Hamilton, he was on old tyres, and yes, Pirelli said they could run forever, but we still knew there was kind of an issue with the curbs potentially being dangerous. And we knew that his tyres also weren't, Hamilton, when he put them on, weren't a fresh set, they were a scrub set as well.
And Norris got the slow puncture as well.
Exactly, which was evidence that did happen. And as the race went on, they were telling Hamilton, look, you've got a big lead here, stay off the curbs, because you know, we've got these jagged curbs here. There is that risk, and there's no point, you know, risking it with that. Yeah,
it was one of those races, like, all the way through, you're just like,
And there was just
all the way
enough
through,
of it that you didn't have any proper, like, oh, should I go to bed kind of moments, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And then lap 53 happens. Latifi crashes out of the race, and it results in a safety car.
You know why he crashed out of the race? Here's the theory, right? This is a conspiracy
theory. Oh my
god.
Oh, stay off Reddit.
Who was... I don't know what you're on about. Who was Latifi behind that he was trying to pass? Question A.
It was Mick, wasn't it?
It was Mick Schumacher, who was defending for his life. He was like, I'm going to try race and defend with this car.
Yeah.
Him and Latifi are battling. He doesn't push. Latifi goes off because he's fighting him and he crashes out. And you know why Mick fought him so hard? Because he was protecting...
Why is that, Kyle?
He was protecting his dad's record and his dad's legacy. And he thought, not today, Lewis. You're not going to beat my dad's record. I'm going to cause Latifi to crash and then Max is going to win it. And what happened? He caused Latifi to crash and Max won it. So his dad's record was safe. Mick Schumacher.
Anyway, so yeah, safety car comes out.
And then
same
it was
deal
just
as
like,
the VSC. Well, no, same deal as the VSC. Lewis has to stay out. He has to. Like, he can't afford to not. He can't afford to come in because then it would put him P2, and who knows if we were going to finish behind the safety car. You know, Max has enough of a buffer where he can come in and pit for, it wasn't fresh softs, but it was there's like a couple
like
of
one or two lap
softs.
They were fine, yeah.
Scrubbed softs, I think, is what they called them.
Yep.
So he came in for softs, and when he comes out, he has 5 lapped cars between him and Lewis. And this is where stuff starts to get a bit complicated.
And it was already interesting at that point, I think, because when we had the original virtual safety car, we all kind of saw, obviously, what was going to happen, that Hamilton was going to stay out because he didn't have the big enough gap, and Max was going to box to the fresh tyres and try pull a Hungary or Spain a charge from the back, right? We went, that's obvious. As soon as this safety car was called, it was almost just like, Twitter and everyone froze for a second, because everyone was thinking, like, what's the calls they've got to make here, and what does this mean, and do we have enough laps, and are they gonna, there was so many permutations, and you went into one, then another, and then another, and you were just thinking, what, and then Max box, and then you really thought, oh my god, what's happening, is there enough laps, is there, and then you thought about...
I mean, you think you just need one lap at this point.
Yes, and then we went, are we going to get the lap, and then they went around for like a lap, and then they cut to Latifi, and still no one was with him, you went, they've just wasted a lap, you know what I mean, and then you saw the back markers, and then you would like, and you heard a bit of the communication, behind the scenes, and then you saw some of the messages, but still,
it was so tense.
And I guess at that point, I don't know about you, but I feel like, from my point of view, I was like, I don't think they're gonna, get going in time.
I genuinely thought that I was like, there's not enough time. They're gonna finish behind the safety car.
But there was still that tiny bit where you went, but there's still chance for something. And if we've seen anything from all the calls they've made this year, there's still a chance, right? And you still had that,
So lap 53, obviously, Latifi crashes. Max pits. They go around. They clear the Latifi crash. I believe lap 56 is when they basically cleared it. They come around to start lap 57. At this entire point, they've been told no drivers will be unlapping themselves.
They've made the call, basically.
They've made the call. Drivers told not to unlap because they didn't want... They wanted to get racing underway as soon as possible. And then they changed their minds on lap... about halfway through lap 57.
That's the thing, lap 57, and it was like halfway through. It was when they normally call the lights off, and instead of the message popping up being safety car lights off, the message was, these cars, as you're about to say, will unlap themselves.
These 5 cars?
Yes, these 5 cars.
Which 5 cars, you ask? The 5 cars directly between Max and Lewis.
And then the next question immediately after that was, but they're right near the end of the lap. What do you mean they're unlapping themselves? Normally they have to get around to that. And then the next message split second after was, safety car in this lap. It was at that point when that message popped up on the screen that I think almost every server on every social media platform in the world just heated up a few more degrees higher than they normally should have been operating. Because every person under the planet, regardless of they're an F1 fan or not, still could figure out what that meant. And they went, that is a call. That's a call that they've made.
I spent the final lap and a half of that race. What should have been thrilling, I was sitting there and I'm just like, I don't know how to feel about this.
Yes.
It wasn't excitement. It was just like
it wasn't unprecedented. There's things you see that are unprecedented and they're amazing because you've never seen them before. This was something that we didn't see before, but you wouldn't expect to see, but not because it's just chance. It's just like, but how has this come to, like, why is this a thing that is here? There's nothing that says this should have been a thing that happened, but it did happen when the stakes are higher than they've ever been in 20, 30 years of the sport. And this, and even thinking about it, I spent 2 days at least, I think it took me until Monday evening to stop thinking about it and start thinking about something else in my life, Almost like 20 hours later, I was still thinking, but this just...
So the race finished at about 1:00. I did not get to... I didn't go to sleep until about 4 because I spent quite literally the next 3 hours just like watching things, reading things, seeing discussions, waiting for decisions, which we'll get into in a bit.
A lot of refreshing of feeds.
Yes. And I couldn't, because I had to get all the information, because I'm like, I had my opinions, but I wanted to see what things like the rules and regulations and what other drivers were saying and what, pundits were saying.
Yes.
And what,
and it's very easy if you're a big fan of one or the other to just, your opinion was just, of course, whatever favored you, and both of them are almost valid. But what was interesting if you were someone in the middle trying to figure out, almost what way is fairer or what, good call, bad call, or this and that, and the permutations, and even looking at all the pundits afterwards were doing the same thing. They were kind of just like, I don't, these are the facts. They just kept saying, this is what happened, this is what the teams think, but they couldn't make a call on it, and how can you know what I mean? That's the point. It was just so unprecedented that it was impossible to make a call on it.
For those who are unaware of why it's so contentious, the particular one that was evident to me, and I think just about everyone, like you mentioned, is the 5 specific unlapped cars unlapping themselves, and I think the 5th car just got past the safety car, and I'm talking like he was a meter ahead of the safety car, and then it popped up safety car coming in this lap. Based on the FIA rules and regulations, the safety car, they have to let the lap cars go around, and then the safety car comes in the following lap. It's actually very explicitly written that way.
Yes, it couldn't be more explicitly written when you actually look at it. It did not take long afterwards to realise,
so
what rule did they act on to make that call? And they just went, and no one knew. It was like, are they allowed to do that? Well, they did do that.
Unfortunately, in the regulations, there's you could argue that yes you can do that, and you can also no, you can't do that. Or you could argue that the race director, yes, he can, or the race director, no, he can't.
That was the point, going forward a bit. So they did immediately after in the half hour, because you have basically half hour to lodge your initial protest as a team if you're going to protest something. So Mercedes, of course, immediately did that, and because we were all curious, going, of course they're going to be pissed, and you heard them over the radio going, what the hell, and everything. So you figured they were going to protest something. So then it turns out that, yes, they were protesting. But they protested 2 things. One was an actual breach against Max, which was that he overtook under the safety car, which, to cover it off quickly, he did for the splittest of second at a time, which you'd argue is no different from when we've seen it happen 100 times in the past, and he gave it back immediately. And even when they started going, you'd argue Lewis actually got a massive Lewis got a massive jump on him actually. So you kind of went, well, regardless if he was there for a second, he wasn't putting anyone in danger, and Lewis had a massive jump anyway. They put that under the rug. So then they push this other thing through, which was saying this is the rule. The rule wasn't followed. What the hell? We want to understand why. Mercedes, I guess, I think the suggestion was to say revert the results back to the previous lap before the call was made. I think they just did that because logically it makes sense. You have to come up with something, but there are no grounds in the rules to say if X happens or if Y is it followed, this is what happens, right? Like we know in the case of a red flag that the results are supposed to be called from the lap before, right? But in this case, even if they had have broken that rule, there wasn't anything to say what to do. So it's like, well, even if, this is broken, what can you do? But the point is the stewards then came out and they essentially gave their justification for why they did it. The thing they referred to, and if you want a better explanation of this, go watch Chainbear, because he did an amazing explanation of this. Essentially where there's kind of a line that almost says that the race director can basically use the safety car and any rules in that how they like at the time.
Here we go. Here we go. I've got it here. It's Article 15.3.
Yeah.
I've got this, by the way, I've got this from The Race, which is another... Scott Mitchell does a bunch of stuff on The Race. This is just one of many articles he wrote over on The Race.
Yeah.
Fantastic. He was very busy that night. But yeah, he says the stewards also highlight another article, Article 15.3, that allows the race director to, quote, control the use of the safety car, which in our determination includes its deployment and withdrawal.
Yes. So that's essentially what the stewards, because of course the stewards are investigating, even though they're investigating themselves in a way, they came back and said, this is what we evoked. And of course the response to that is, well then couldn't they just do whatever the hell they want under the safety car under any day, and then the whole sport is under repute. So you go, what's the point of having a strategy? Because the stewards could go, we're just going to make the safety car, we're going to put 10 safety cars out, let's go! Let's play musical chairs, you find a safety car, nope, you're out, you're disqualified. The point is the rules don't just exist to keep people safe and, so you've got some guidelines. It's also because strategists have to make calls in certain scenarios based on what may happen. They have to run probabilities saying there's a chance of this, someone crashes, what's the chance of VSC, safety car, red flag, right? But when you have the situation where this has been evoked, which essentially says they can do what they wish is best, even if it's something out of the blue or out of the regulations, then you go, even if they made that call and the result hadn't changed, right? There would still be a massive question going, but why the hell did they do that? Why was this call made? Even if, Max stayed P2, Lewis stayed P1, I would hope that everyone would still be asking, how did they make that call? What was it they evoked to make that call, right? Because it's so...
100%.
Yeah. And of course, Mercedes passed that went, okay, we're going to talk to, I think it's the COP, the COS or something. I heard it before and I can't remember. It's essentially the general higher body that looks at legal cases to do with competitive sport, right? It's like an external body, and they essentially went straight to them and they said, oi, this has just happened. We need, a case brought up here because we're, it's not against another team. This is against essentially the FIA who have made this call that they believe have completely stuffed them in a competitive sense. Yeah, my interpretation was I thought that they have all the internal FIA F1 stuff they're doing, and then I think as well because Mercedes, if you saw the footage, they had hired a specific lawyer for that weekend ahead of time, and apparently it's guy. I don't know specifically what. I know there's some things for football that he's done, like he's turned incredible cases around. So they've got like
I saw that as well.
Really intelligent sports lawyer. He was there on hand, and right away as soon as the race was over, he was with Toto talking. So obviously they thought ahead and went, yeah, we have to get a big gun in case something.
They were
happens.
expecting something,
and sure enough, he's going to get paid well because what bigger case could there be for him to handle than this, right? So Mercedes like, thank God we hired this guy because, this isn't something where it's Mercedes versus Red Bull. It's also Mercedes versus the FIA really, and this decision has been made, you know what I mean? In a sporting context, them as an entity entering, paying money legally to do this sport and bound by a contract, do have a case to say this, these guys have stuffed us out, and there could be ramifications in terms of, titles and payouts and everything like that, right? So that's why it's a bigger issue than just internal to F1.
No, see, it's just messy. It's really messy, and it's just sort of tarnished what should have been a celebration on one of the sides
one of the ones
for winning
that
the
won.
championship.
Yeah, and it's ironic in that it probably couldn't have been a better ending for this type of season, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was a good ending. It's just that it fit the greater context of the season.
This is the they made Chainbear again. He's fantastic video. Watch it. I'll leave a link. But he said this as well. And this is the thing that I have been sort of racking around my brain for ever since the end of the race. It's whether or not it's the whole sport versus entertainment. What is Formula One? And this has been almost ongoing for, you know, the last few years, ever since Formula One sort of been coming into this more social era with Drive to Survive, with, you know, all the
revamp on social media. Yeah, because there used to be the hard lockdown on social media use for drivers and teams as well, where they had to get permission to post what they want. Now they can post whatever the hell they want. Their drivers can go out, post what they want. Massive change in the audience sport and everything. So
it culminated in this, didn't it? It's like you get to the end of it and you're like, okay, well, is this a motorsport or is it a TV show?
Yeah.
Like, what are we watching? And you look, all you have to do is look at the last lap of that Grand Prix and you're like, well, I think they just gave us our answer. This isn't a sport anymore. This is a TV show. Yeah, I don't know. It just, that's what it feels like, you know? You can't help but, as someone who, you know, I love Formula One and I know you do as well. And I genuinely love it. If I didn't, I wouldn't be making this video. I wouldn't have watched it for all the years I have. But it's so disappointing the way that it was handled. But at the same time, fuck, it was exciting.
It was, and you gotta admit, it's something that when we go back to the start of next year, and we'll go, it's, as you say, like what people were saying, it's one of the history books, but this is one that's going to be the front page of the history books, you know what I mean? Like when you look at the first, 200 years of F1, this should be, they should have that sticker up saying the 5 lap cars may now lap themselves on the front page of the 200 years of F1 book, you know? And to be fair, like even a few years ago, the conversation was always, you know what I mean? Like, there was all that drama because the FIA would always want to make drastic new rules to make it more exciting for the TV, but the big players like Ferrari and that would threaten to pull out. And the big question was, well, okay, they would almost always call, I wouldn't say call their bluff, but they would say, okay, we're not going to make these big changes because we need Ferrari and that. But the other argument was, but what if we do just push it through and get rid of Ferrari, but it ultimately makes a sport that's so insane that we don't really care who's in it because the sport is just so good, right? Even if the names aren't there, you know what I mean? And so there's been that push for a while, and especially through the Bernie era, where it was more so just about, I guess, the people in F1 and the classic fans, rather than actually what's good for TV, what's good for entertainment. You know what I mean? Because essentially, this sport does exist for entertainment purposes. You know, it is entertainment.
It is a business,
yeah. So it's a business in money, and it's an entertainment. And so I feel like this year, and the most recent few years, but especially this year, they've done really well at making entertainment. But it almost seems like, as you say, it almost feels like they've gone way over the line. They almost went so well that they were like, oh, we're doing amazing, like look at all the stuff we're doing, and they just kind of ran with it without taking a second to stop and think. And even at T1, when you saw that incident, again, you could kind of just say it actually looks like that, they just made the call to say, yes, let them race, we're not going to get involved. And you went, it looks like they've properly done their homework and they've gone, we're going to, keep it safe. Even when, they crashed and they just did the VSC, it's like, that was the safe call. Yeah, they could have maybe argued it was a red flag or a safety car, but no, the call that just, settled things down. And then it's like all out the window, like, no, this one call that's just the entire year and everything it stands for, just blown open to shreds. And now everyone that's even remotely interested in F1 still, I talked about it today with about 3 different people at work, most of which I didn't even know watched F1 when I came in today, and they said, oh, you like the F1, don't you? What do you think? And I'm like, it's just so much conversation.
I had someone message me on Facebook, and he's like, oh, that was a bit crap, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, about what? He's never talked to me about Formula One. He's actually, I think he's actively said that he just doesn't really like Formula One. So he's just like, oh, that's a bit crap, wasn't it? And I'm just like, about what? He's like, Formula One, mate. I'm just like, oh, I just didn't expect it. And I was looking at, the trending on Twitter as well. And the next day, and it's Formula One as a tag had over 1 million it was mentioned over 1 million times in less than 24 hours. It's just like, holy shit.
And that's what I was saying to you, too. Even when I saw certain people tweeting about it at the time, and I had to double check who was tweeting it, because there was like game developers and TV presenters, you know, that I followed that were tweeting about it, and I'm like, they were watching it, and that, you know, and they had takes on it, and they were saying, you know, some of them were like, yes, I'm so happy for Max, because they didn't, I guess, you know, they didn't have a full grasp on the rules, but they still realized that some amazing call had been made. Like, everyone on Twitter was like, oh my god, that's such a massive call that changes the whole stake of the race, right? Even if they didn't understand any other ramifications, it was still so obvious to everyone that that call was so, you know, such a colossal impact on the state of the race in the last lap. And you know, it's not even like we had a bit of time to process it. It was like, this is the call, and now they're gone, and you just like, you know, wow.
At this point, 40 minutes in, we should say congratulations to Max Verstappen for winning the championship.
Yes.
For now. I don't see it changing, regardless of what happens, but who knows what's going to happen in the coming days, coming weeks, months, who knows. But you have to say that, and we'll talk about this. We're going to do another video on like the full season general review. But whichever driver won today, and this has been said by everyone, but like, both drivers deserved it.
Yes.
You know, whoever won it, you'd be like, okay, they deserved it. It's not like, oh, this person deserves it, this driver deserves it over this driver. It's like, well, not really. They were tied on points going into the final race.
And even for the most recent look back, even if you look at Nico and Hamilton, it's like Hamilton towards the end of that championship did really have it wrapped up. And he had to be so far in the lead in Malaysia and his engine to blow for Nico to have a chance, right? Like, yes, that all their blows earlier in the year, but it was pretty 50-50. And Hamilton was just getting away. And Nico, like Rosberg, like for anyone in the same car as Hamilton still in retrospect to be that close to him for that long, you still say is incredible. You know, Rosberg's an incredible driver. Even now as a pundit, you see how smart he is and how clever he is playing the tactics and that. But he still had to get so lucky. This was different to that. You can, you know, as soon as one person might bring up all these points that driver X was lucky, you go, yeah, but what about all this happened to driver Y? It's been like so level between them, you know what I mean? That no matter what happened, even if one of them couldn't start the race, if the other one got crashed out by a back marker, you wouldn't then go, oh, well, the other driver got lucky to win it. You'd go, like, maybe at the time, yes, you would. You'd go, oh, you know, if Lewis had been taken out by, I don't know, Mazepin on the track, if Mazepin was, you know, not under the weather, unfortunately, you'd still go, yes, Max got lucky, but he still deserved to be in that spot to win the title on that kind of result, right? If you want my opinion, yes, you could maybe argue that Lewis got a little bit luckier, but one driver's always going to be a little bit luckier, and there wasn't really anything I'd call that was unjust throughout the year. It just was F1, right? It was pure, brutal F1 throughout the entire year, which is all we want to see.
Just racing, bro.
Yes,
racing.
Yes. What did he say? It's a Toto. It's a motor race. We went car racing is the line. Everyone's going to have that on a shirt starting next year. We went car racing in 2021.
There's a quote from an article I want to take. It's written by Chris Medland, who you probably you might have seen him on Twitter, but he's a very knowledgeable guy in the Formula One space and reports on a lot of Formula One stuff. And he wrote an opinion piece on Racer.com. This is on how the championship ended and its effect effectively on Max and Lewis. And it's, quote, Verstappen is hurting because he had to spend the first 4 hours as world champion waiting for it to be confirmed rather than celebrating freely, and now faces another wait to see what the appeals process will be. Hamilton is also hurting because a race that appeared to be his was then snatched away from him on the last lap as Verstappen took full advantage of a situation that the regulations didn't appear to permit. Verstappen did nothing wrong, Hamilton did nothing wrong, Red Bull did nothing wrong, Mercedes did nothing wrong. They all played the hand they were dealt, but whether that hand should have been dealt in the first place is now what's up for controversial debate. But there's a to be confirmed against Verstappen's name for now, and Hamilton surely won't even get 10% of the enjoyment he'd deserve if he's crowned champion by an overturned decision. It's not what either of them deserves, and it's not of their own doing. And I thought that just sort of summed up. That's good.
I haven't read that, but that's amazing. I love
it's that. It's a really good article. Again, I'll link that one in the description. Yes. Chris Medland is fantastic. Yep. I rate his opinions and his comments very, very highly, and I thought that just summed it up really, really well. I imagine it was a weird feeling to be celebrating a world champion, your first world championship, not knowing whether or not you were going to still keep it, like hours after the race had completed. Like, it's not like the Hamilton Massa, where it's like they thought he was champion and then, it was half a lap later they found out. And it's like, well, it's not that. It's like he's hours after the race is completed, he's celebrated the world championship, he's done interviews, he's taken his trophy for first at Abu Dhabi. And there's still this lingering thing over his head, like, well, actually, it could be taken away from him.
I was curious how some of the media would portray it, and especially like more of the local media.
Sure.
And I was looking, because of course we're in Australia. Please don't hackers find our IPs because we're in Australia. There was some. I'm trying to find. There was the Fox media I know seemed to be extraordinarily Team Hamilton. Some of the things I read was like, okay. I'm trying to find. Gosh, I really want to find. There was some title I read that just made me realize how. It was something about Christian Horner, and it was some article titled about how Horner coaxed the stewards into creating a scam result or something like that was the title. And I was just like, is this real media that we're seeing in Australia? It made me almost a bit ashamed because it was everywhere. And I'm like, really? Like, especially after a weekend where we've just had an F2 champion, you know what I mean, from Australia. And I'm just like, shouldn't we be celebrating? And I'm like, oh my God, that was...
This is why you don't, like, read or watch or do any traditional media. You read people like Chris Medland and The Race and Chainbear and people who know what
there's
they're
actual
talking
free,
about.
Fantastic, up-to-date media that you can read online now. But it almost just made me go like, is this like everywhere? Is this, But it makes, because, I guess the thing is as well, very tight-knit in F1, I guess I count us as, let's say, super fans in that tight-knit. There seems to be very few people that are more on both sides. A lot of people just seem to be of the general opinion that call was very... That call needs looking into, really. But it's not our true say. It's, it's got to be sorted by those that know it, and we've just got to sit and wait and see what's going on. But as soon as you take a step out, and it's almost just like there's chaos, like in this outer circle of light fans and diehards and news and, tabloids and all that just seem to be going bonkers. And I didn't fully realize it till I looked yesterday afternoon. I'm like, oh my God, there's some takes on here which are just so extreme. So you forget, you go, although everyone that's really into it has a clue, it really has actually rippled out into this massive bumfest of controversy, as if it wasn't enough already. So it's interesting how much it's echoed out.
But I wanted to touch on like other stuff that happened of the race, and mainly, Sainz got P3. That's cool. He got a podium.
He got a podium, which means that he beats the golden Ferrari child, Leclerc, in the championship.
And Norris.
To be fair, he beat Norris
was in third,
which is amazing. Yeah. But then when you remember that Norris has scored like a point in the last 5 races because he's been the unluckiest person ever, you go, okay. But then you look and he's 2 places ahead of Leclerc. And you wouldn't say Leclerc's had a bad season. But then you realise, you think, but Charles started there this year, and he's beaten Leclerc.
You mean Carlos?
Sorry, yeah. So Carlos, So Carlos started there this year, especially when we saw a ton of other teammates that started in new teams struggle a ton. You know what I mean? This was the year of you need half the season to get up to date if you're new to F1 because you'll really struggle, right? And then he beats him, and you just go, wow. But then I almost don't see that as in going, oh, well, Leclerc's crap. I almost see that as going, if they can put a car together next year or the year after, how strong is that team going to be? Because they've got 2 guys that, as we've seen, are really close, that help each other a ton on track. They've probably squabbled least out of any other teammates.
You kind of took for granted how good Carlos Sainz was when he was in, let's say, McLaren. You took for granted just how good he was, and he's come up against Norris, and Norris is obviously incredible as well, and he held his own there, and then he comes into Ferrari against Charles, and Charles is like this prodigal son of Ferrari that's going to take them to victory again, and Sainz in his first year just takes him and beats him in the championship, and it's like, that's
impressive.
That's a strong pairing at Ferrari if they can get their shit together.
Yeah, and I think it's a big statement on the change in Ferrari's culture as well. Because if you think traditionally, they've always been we have one number one main driver, and the other driver is kind of just there as a supporting role. And yet, you very rarely saw this year where they were really only focusing on one or the other driver, and then and yes, you could say it's different when you're near the pointy end and you're going for a championship, and that's fair enough. But for for Sainz to have gotten that comfortable that quickly, obviously it's underneath. They've really put an effort in to get him up to speed quickly and really bring him in and show him that, yes, we've got your support as much as Leclerc, you know what I mean? And throughout the year, it's important that we really work together, which you could say, yes, any team is able to get the drivers to work together, but when that's not really been the Ferrari way of doing things for so long, and especially when you look at the end of last year when there was a bit of tarnished, relationship between, Leclerc and Vettel, and obviously part of that would have been because behind the scenes and how they were egging them on and that, when they didn't have the most competitive car. So the fact that, I think credit as well to Ferrari, where obviously behind the scenes they've really done a lot to make sure that they're building a team for two players, and both those two players as a result of that have been able to flourish. And even when you look at the start of the year, they were kind of, the fifth best car, and now pretty easily they're the third best car, you know what I mean? They've suddenly shot up, McLaren and Norris were miles ahead, you know what I mean, in that third place slot. And then suddenly Ferrari just zoomed in and they've just smashed it out in the second half. They've completely, they almost haven't put a foot wrong. It's been amazing. And so that's why it's a case of looking into the future going, wow, if they suddenly pop up in the next year or the year after as a proper team that's up there, looks super strong, it's not a surprise because this year's been the groundwork and what good groundwork they've laid,
And the other thing I wanted to mention as well is Yuki and Gasly get P4 and P5, which they stole on the last lap on fresh tyres, getting Bottas as well. Poor Bottas.
I think about half my messages to you during the race was going, look at Yuki, look what he's doing.
Yuki,
he's doing it.
Yuki. Yep.
Over Saturday and Sunday. Like, look at him.
He had a good race. That was a good. That's Yuki needed a good end to his season because let's be honest, he's had a pretty shit season.
Even he himself said to the media, I don't understand why they signed me for another year. When the driver is saying that, you go, oh, okay, something's up.
That's not good.
And then just out of nowhere, the last few races he's had pace, he's just been unlucky and been incidents and that, and you've gone, well, he's got the pace, but he's still got a bit of, working out to do, and it's getting to the end of the year, whatever. But then he does just seem to hook it together for the last one, and you go, fair play. Why was this the rest of the year? But okay, there's renewed hope here,
Yeah. So we've got a few questions that we want to answer. We've got from a few friends / viewers. This one comes from Twitter and your friend Hyper.
I don't know who you're on about.
I hate
that
asshole. And he says, or he asks rather, if you were in Massey's shoes, what would you have done? Red flag and have a sprint to the line? Throw the rulebook out the window and let them race? Your thoughts. And you can only pick one answer, and that's the answer we'll go with. Yep, just that. It's black and white. I think, what would you have done in Massey's shoes? I think just use your imagination.
I mean, if I'm Massey, knowing what's happened... Oh, God. I thought I wouldn't be surprised if they had have red flagged it, because I feel like more recently they have been allowed to be more lenient with it. And maybe if they did, let's say that they're going to take some influence for trying to make it a show, right? We can say that they should have followed it by the law, but they weren't going to. Based on the precedents throughout the rest of the year, you almost guarantee that there was that thing almost in the back of the mind, whatever you want to call it, that said, we need to do something for the show. This decision, as long as it's a safe decision, it's not going to put anyone in danger, any marshals or whatever, has to be something that's also going to give us a bit of a show rather than ending on safety car, right? And I think based on that, what they did was too far out there. I still don't know what word to use, but I think you could maybe justify a red flag. I don't know how they'd cover it up. Maybe they'd say we needed to inspect the barrier to make sure it was fine. I don't know, something. But I think then if they had have pulled that, they probably still would have looked at it and gone, well, should they have made that call? But then when you reset the playing field, you can get them both on similar ties, you know what I mean? You get all the there was even some back markers, of course, that weren't let through that could have made up a place or something, right? If they were actually near the other, so you'd argue that solves all that, right? I still, yes, it's still that's still outside what was actually need to happen, but I think that would have still satisfied everyone wanting a last lap showdown, and then whoever won from that, you would be less inclined to say, oh well, it feels like Lewis got a bit robbed, because let's be real, in that scenario, once they let the back markers through, it was basically guaranteed. There was no way that Max wasn't getting through, right? It was. You knew as soon as they let through, you're like, they've just, they didn't make the call, regardless of what it was, to give him the championship. They wanted to do it because they wanted to have a last lap showdown because, as I say, that's it, TV. Yeah. I think doing it in a red flag solves that as well, so that's what I would do in those shoes. If I am Massey and I have to do something that's going to be a bit for the show, then that, Do I say he should have done it? It's you know, you can talk about this for hours, but
yeah,
that would have had so many less ripples, right? And still would have been an amazing 100%. Talking point.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, all of it's in hindsight, right? Like, but in hindsight, you look at it and you think, red flag, if you red flag it, then you can give them, you can do it early enough, where you can give them a couple of laps rather than just a single lap. And then obviously the tire issue for Hamilton, the tire disparity goes away. And that sets up, what they want as their blockbuster ending. But, he has to make these decisions in such a short span of time, and with Toto in his ear and Horner in his other, just screaming at him.
Just insane. And he's also got to make sure he's clear-headed, so he's making sure that the calls he's making are safe, you know what I mean? So that's what he said.
Exactly.
People were saying, why didn't they let the lap cars through sooner? Well, he couldn't, because they don't like to let lap cars through while they're still a stranded car, because they do race around a bit, and it's too dangerous. So that makes sense why they didn't do it sooner, So I agree with that. I'm saying they should not have let those cars through sooner than they did, because it was unsafe. Totally, I'm behind that, so...
Yep, for sure. Let's go to this one from Discord. This is from Crossodog, my friend Sam. And he says, I'd love some podcast time regarding the safety car procedure, opening some discussions regarding old rules like not allowing pit stops under the safety car. Should lap cars be allowed to regain their lap, or should the race director have the power to drop lap cars to the back? I'm going to touch on, I guess, all three of these, but that third point is I read that and that was very interesting to me. But the first one is not allowing pit stops under the safety car. I know this is this is something that a lot of people have taken issue with, particularly this season.
Under safety car and under red flags,
and changing tires under red flag,
and
as well.
Like parts and
I guess
all
we
that
come
too.
into it.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same discussion as saying in a point where a team could gain an advantage through luck. It's essentially trying to eliminate the factor of luck, right? Because you've seen, again, all you have to do in terms of red flags is even look at Imola when Hamilton was in the wall and he was almost a lap down and he had a damaged car and they red flagged it. He was able to get new tyres, completely repair. He went on to get second, right? He wouldn't have gotten second. He would have been lapped because his car was stuffed, right? So yeah, it's in a vacuum. I think if we had, let's say you're out on the road and there's a perfect computer that says, yes, this car is safe to continue, or no, it needs repairs, or there's going to be damage, it's dangerous, right? The point the rule exists is because if you're in a red flag scenario and you have, like a leak in your airbox, you're going to say, well, we need to fix this thing because it's dangerous to go out. And if they just say there's a black right rule saying no repairs, you go, okay, so we're just going to go out and potentially leak oil everywhere or do something stupid, right?
Yeah.
But then how do you say how much damage is enough, you know what I mean? And that's what, even when Max locked his tyres in qualifying, and they said, do they have any grounds to say we need to change it?
Yeah.
And I believe they were saying, well, no, because then how do they, do they say if you've got a 2.5 or more centimetre flat spot? Well, then he's just going to go out and skid on all four tyres and go, look, they're damaged, So there's a reason that all these, it's, and I think there's other sports. I don't know if it's in NASCAR, for example, they close pit road, but you can go in if, but then you take a penalty, for example, which could then say, well, if you got damage, then you can change it, but you get a penalty. I think that's the only way to do it, right? But then you could say, the other argument is, but then doesn't that luck add to part of the fun? Like if we go back to, I think it was 2017 when we were in the Australian Grand Prix, and Vettel got that win in the first race because of a really lucky virtual safety car, and that was epic for that time because we hadn't seen Ferrari at the top, and Vettel was still fairly new there, and that win was awesome because we went, yes, they got lucky, and that's just how the sport goes, right? But then you look, so it's. I guess you got to look at all the events and say, is there both 50% of events that are good and 50% that are bad? Well, then maybe it levels out and you could get rid of it because it wouldn't change anything. But I feel like if you just have it entirely strategy and you have no elements of luck, then...
Well, then Mercedes and
exactly, that's what I'm saying, yeah. So the past few years we would have had even more boring time, you know what I mean? So it's almost like, you could say it's a bit fake, but then it's that whole balance of entertainment, right? You need to have some balance for the entertainment factor.
A big portion of the fun of the strategies that the teams come up with is the fact that the strategy could just be thrown out the window because of one event that happens. And that's kind of part of the fun. If it was just all strategy, then they have so much data. They'd be like, okay, this is the best strategy. We're doing this, and it doesn't matter what happens. This is the strategy,
and it gives you hope as well, right? It gives you hope.
Yeah.
When you see it starting to rain, and you go, but it could be a flag. Do we box? Do we stay out? It's all about that hope. It's for people that support, is again the little guys, and maybe hope that they get lucky with something.
Should lapped cars be allowed to regain their lap, or should the race director have the power to drop lapped cars to the back? I hadn't even considered it, but dropping lapped cars to the back and then just giving them the lap, like as if they've done a lap. I think if they can somehow do that, I would say that's almost a better way than letting them go past and drive around, and then you're out for another 2 laps while you wait for the cars to drive all the way around the track to catch to get far enough ahead, and then they bring the safety car in. It's like this way, it's just like the field's already bunched up, so it's just like it's much quicker to go. So they're all here. It's much quicker to go from here to here than it is from here to go to here.
Yes.
While they're all traveling in this direction, and it's just like, if they're gonna make these sort of decisions that they did in the last race anyway, just be like, drop them to the back and be like, hey, you've done an extra lap, congratulations. And then we just don't have this issue at all, and then it's not a safety issue with cars being, slower cars being out ahead and affecting the front running cars. Then you could even change the rules to where it's like, okay, now the safety car can come in. The second those cars drop
because they barely have to go
back where they're supposed to go, then you can be like, okay, now the safety car can come straight in because there's no obstacles anymore.
The only thing I'd say is against it is on the other side there has been the way I'm going to link it to is the blue flags rule, because the blue flags rule exists because you have the leaders fighting, they come into a pack and they want to get the guys that are behind out the way so they don't influence the result at all, right? And that makes sense in a vacuum. You go, yeah, well, that makes sense. But then you do see now and then where there's other fights going on. And F1, yes, it's supposed to be at the top in the championship, but the other teams that are there with their budget or entry aren't necessarily there because they want to be at the top. They're fighting for 5th or 6th in the constructors, right? And if they get 5th or 6th, they consider that as a success. Part of that might be that they're in a tight battle of 4 or 5 cars. We even saw this, we didn't see the ramifications of it, but when we saw Max and Lewis coming through the field, and there was that pack of 5 cars that were nose to tail, right? And they did have to essentially pause what they were doing to get out the way, right? And there has been genuine argument to say, well, why don't we just get rid of the blue flag rules? They have their fight, and everyone is a good enough driver that if you are coming through, then you have to assess the risk and figure out a good time to pass them as you would in any other car. So the point is, this links again to this, where you could say, for example, they put safety car out just as Max is halfway through this pack, right? And the argument is, well, then the top 2 that were just in front of them are going to go to the back, and the other 2 then move and have to go, and then are lapped, right? And then they're a lap down. They've lost an entire lap, even though before that call they were only about 2 seconds behind, right? Because of how that's worked out. And the point of everyone being able to unlap is then you get everyone on the same lap, and then it evens it up. And you could say on the flip side, if you're midway through, you had a 20-second gap to the guy behind. Well, now he's caught up, right? But that's the same for everyone in the field. So the point is, it's trying to have the safety car and the effect it has then levels out the playing field in general, right? It brings the leaders back together, it brings all the guys at the back together, right? So it depends on what line you want to go. If they want to say, no, it really is just about the top, then yes, 100% you put them to the back, even if it disadvantages them, because it's, we really just want to get things going for the top as soon as possible to make it about the top, right? But there is enough of these murmurs with the blue flags even saying, should we even have those, that I see that if that's not going to, if we were to say, get blue flags out the window, but have this new rule where they fall to the back, where you go, but that's just taking 2 steps in different directions, right? About the concept we want to go in. Maybe they can choose to do either. Maybe they can say you either let them catch up, or where they need to be quick about it, they can send them to the back. That's potentially a rule where they could have both. Yes, you'd have to have some stipulation in the rules to say when they choose to use what, right? And there might be some teams that protest and go, well, hold on, if we were to go back around, we'd have a chance to get an extra point to get 5th in the constructors. Instead, you sent us to the back, we're a lap behind our competitors, we're stuffed, right? That's where it's tricky, and I have heard a bit of, I do see some chatter now and then with it. There's a lot more to it than at the face, right? I don't know if you agree or it makes sense, but that's what I think about when I go through that. So
last one from Sam Crosslow Dog. He gave us, will Yas Marina ever be a decent track? And it's a fair question, because I think the layout is better this year. Obviously they changed the layout. They got rid of some real shit corners. and made them just,
got rid of some shit corners, and
better.
and the corners that they kept, they kind of made them a bit less dependent on your aero and the dirty air and everything, right? So you could keep closer to Like again, it feels like these changes similar to what they've done. If you look at Zandvoort, if you look at Melbourne, they've made them to properly, I feel like, accommodate the new cars, right? I think these changes again, where you've got these. Yep. You'd still argue that these medium speed sweeper corners, you go, yeah, but the problem is that still creates dirty air. But then you go, yeah, but with the new cars, that should help reduce that, because you've got a lot more natural drag from medium speed corners where you're going around. That should give you tons of, natural suck through all the faux ground effect that they've got. The point of this is saying, let's, put a lot of these corners. That's what they're doing at Melbourne. They're taking out a few of the kind of niggly slower corners just to make them straights that are flowy, because then not only are they straights you can closer, but then these new cars should be even more spectacular through them. So I think for this year it was good to get a taste of it, and I think I'm glad that they actually did it quite quick, and I'm glad that I heard people like Karun Chandok were on the team that helped change things. So it's not just that they've gone back to what's his name? The track designer. Yeah, they're not just going back to Helmut Marko, go and redo something.
No, Helmut Marko.
No, Helmut Marko, you're right.
The Red Bull guy. I'm so tired, man. Herman Tilke.
There you go. Cut that out. They've just gone back to him and said, redesign it. They've actually got a little committee together and gone, let's actually get some driver input. And I think the changes, based on the time spent, they probably had to make decisions. Yeah, it's it's good, and it sets a precedence that they've taken decisions like these, and similarly they took decisions on Albert Park, and that sets a precedence that they could do it in the future. And I think that's really positive, in that if it is still crap, there's no reason why they can't change it.
Will it ever be a decent track? I think we have to see what next year's cars are like on the track first.
It's all theoretical
before we make a judgment. Yeah. Exactly, all theoretical. I think we have to see how they are next year. If it still produces some pretty average racing, like you said, hopefully they can make some changes again. But I mean, there's only so much you can do before you might as well just go to a different track or just design a different track. You see some fantastic like junior formula races on tracks that you're like, well, you never get this in F1. It's just like, but you ask Marina and you'll see you side by side and three into a corner and all these overtakes, and it's so good. But it's not something you see in F1 just because of the way the cars are,
and because they have so much more complexity and reliance on air. Because in F2 it's essentially a spec series. You've got your setup, but they can make that car to be a good car to race per se. Well, F1, especially in the barge board era, that's the main thing, right? It's these front wings that they've had to reduce the elements for every year. They're just taking more and more elements off, and these barge boards, which we say, goodbye to the end of the barge board era. And the purpose of that is to say, this is one of the things that gets most affected by all this bloody dirty air. Let's just gone. It's so even if we can say yes, there's a chance that the teams will figure out different things that rely on aero, we're just going to delete one of the worst offenders, so you can't even do anything fancy there, because they tried to simplify it and yet they still get even more complex every year. So they just went deleted, and now it's like, okay, cool.
We've got 5 questions from Mark here. We'll go through them very quickly because I think we've touched
rapid time.
I think we've touched on a lot of the things that he brings up. But question 1, why was there no reason to red flag? This is in reference to the safety car that was brought out for Latifi. Why was there no reason to red flag, and what would necessitate a red flag over a safety car? Well, I can see that they could safely clean up under a safety car. If a car is crashed within the white lines of the track and with debris on the racing line, why not just chuck the red? I would put out a safety car if there's a crash near the track, but if there has to be marshals or vehicle removal on track, it seems wise to throw the red. And I think this is... You were asking how they could justify the red. I think this is the way they could have justified the red. They could have said to improve racing, but there was a car on track and debris on track, and they could have been like, okay, no, we need to get this off track. We need to clean the debris. We'll pop the red flag because we don't know how long that's going to take, particularly this close to the end of the race. I think the reason why they didn't is there was already, from my understanding, there was already conversations before the race that if this exact scenario came up, they wouldn't just red flag for the sake of red flagging. And I, looking at that incident, having watched a lot of F1, I was looking at that, I'm like, that's a safety car, that's not a red flag.
I mean, red flags used to be a lot rarer than they are now, but generally it seems to be if there's enough debris on the track where there's risks of punches and that, then they'll say, well, we've got to red flag it because it's not safe to drive a safety car and cars through there, especially if they need to clean up the track. Or if there's enough debris around the track where they just say, let's just red flag it to then probably make sure we get all of it, rather than having to, have a safety car to, still only have people on it that have to then get off the racing line, right? The point, if there's too much mess around. Or if they think, if a car's going to be stranded there for a while, I think they don't like to run behind a safety car. It feels like maybe like more than 8 or 9 laps at this point. It used to be sometimes get them behind the safety car for ages. Now it feels like if they know there's going to be a big cleanup, they'll just red flag to say, because then we can take our time to make sure we're trying to clean it rather than rush because it's a big job, right? Or if they think there's damage to the barrier where there needs to be either investigation where the officials have to go down and have a look. But the officials have to go down to have a look. And even though they didn't formally replace that, it was still enough for damage where they went, no, we need to assess because this is a safety thing. And if the guys are going to go down there, we don't know how long it's going to take. We don't want them to rush. They're not going to be up in the control room. We need to do this properly, right? So it freezes everything. So because none of those were met, because yes, he hit the wall, but the damage was kind of just in a little corner of the track. He was on the track, but there wasn't any stuff splashed everywhere. There wasn't a barrier out. There wasn't carbon fiber everywhere. Yeah. And they probably thought, we've got enough time to clean this up, within the next few laps. So that's why they didn't. They would still need to have a reason to red flag it. Even if it seems like sometimes they red flag over little things compared to massive accidents, there's still generally some justification there. And there wasn't anything really there that says this necessitates rather a red flag.
Okay, second question. How much of this is purely on Massey? Like, he should 100% lose his job. But is there more to it? I did not know he was not the clerk of the course, and I thought the whole working within a team point was important. He's referencing the Chainbear video we had.
Yes, that's what's from the message before.
Because Massey doesn't look like the kind of guy who works in a team. How much of this is purely on Massey? Because obviously there's... you look online now and everyone's calling for Massey's head. It seems.
Accusations aside, I think really you got to remember when people say Charlie wouldn't have done this. Charlie was in this sport for 20, 25 years. He was there for a while, you know what I mean? And I'm sure early on we don't really remember, but there was probably calls. Well, I know from when I was listening to to pundits speak about it. So they said there were plenty of times when Charlie, if you remember Vettel at Mexico in 2016 or 17, whatever it was, and towards the end of the race, and he was screaming on the radio at Charlie, and even at the race, he told Charlie to F off, you know what I mean? He was that pissed off at him. And you'd argue that in retrospect, you went, they handled that poorly, so that, he's new. He does have a team there, but there's still an argument to say that, that Charlie had a second-hand man directly, which Massey doesn't have, and they probably could restructure it in general. It's still, it's still his responsibility to make that call, but then it's still a case of saying he is relatively new, and he's, had to learn a lot in one of the most intense times of F1 history. I still think it still lies on him, as you say, and I still think there might have been other people that wouldn't have made that decision, but it's not... It's really a really, really hard position for anyone to be in at that point, you know what I mean? And
yeah, and I think they said it on the post show. 3 hours into the post show, the Sky commentators were they were talking about Massey and Rosberg and Brundle. I think were both they were talking about him. It's just this has been one of the toughest. Who else could come in? It's they're saying people are calling for Massey. Says who would come in and be able to handle it better than Massey did, and they're just who would come in and handle that
that's not a reason. That's not a reason for someone to keep their job, but just puts in if he does a horrible job, he needs to be fired, then that's fine. But it's not a perspective it puts it in perspective that it's saying. There's not many other people with his resume, that could arguably have done it better. You could say it's a flaw in how it's structured, it's a flaw in whatever, but that's not necessarily on him as well. You said that's a greater FIA problem with the tools that he's given, right? And you just hope that they look at this and analyze. And I don't know. I don't think his head belongs on a picket like some people are saying in that. But what an impossible! It's an impossible job, as I say. Yes.
Yeah. I do agree. I'll say this because I don't want to defend too hard and get people angry. there was some shocker decisions, and I think a lot, if not most, of the scrutiny is on the stewards and on Massey, and I think they need to answer for some of that. Do I think he should lose his job? I personally don't think so. I do think they should restructure how, like you said, restructure how the stewarding works, how the race director works, give him more people to stop him from doing everything. I think a lot of the communication with the teams has gotten a bit out of hand. I don't know how much is due to it being broadcast, how much is because it's being broadcast live.
You
and how
forget
much
as well, you see him in the spotlight because they cut to his camera a lot and you do hear him talking a lot when that it used to be all behind the scenes. So you'd say, yes, it's his fault, but you wouldn't be able to attribute a character to him. It's the fact that he's a character now that you see as a pivotal part of the race as much as anyone else. So
One last quote, it's from the same article from Chris Medland, and he actually talks about Michael Massey and his decisions and whatnot, but he says, quote, "I defend Massey a lot. I think he has an impossible job, and people look back on the Charlie Whiting days through rose-tinted glasses. Whiting made mistakes, big, costly, dangerous ones. But his demeanour and longevity commanded respect in a way Massey hasn't achieved yet, and perhaps the openness of Massey to allow communications to be broadcast and to face the media opens up the potential for greater scrutiny than Whiting got. And where I will still defend him is I don't feel he was biased in any way towards one driver or the other over the course of the championship. The fact that fans of both sides can vehemently claim their driver was targeted by the FIA suggests Massey was pretty close to spot on in terms of impartiality, if nothing else, because he annoyed both sides equally on different occasions." And it's true. Like, if you really look at it, and this is something I've been saying as well, that, they even before this race, they've been calling, Massey, calling the stewards biased. It's like both sides at different times or even at the same time, they're just like, oh, this bias towards Max or bias towards Lewis. It's like, you can't have it both ways. You can't be biased towards both of them.
That's not what bias means.
It's so illogical, yeah. So, like, I absolutely 100% agree with that. I think he goes on, Chris Medland does go on again in that article to say this similar things that, they still need to, there's still
a lot of work
they
to
still
do
need to
behind
change
the
some
scenes,
things.
yeah.
A lot of work to do behind the scenes, but I just wanted to point out that, he's not this biased demon decision making things like, puppets on and strings and he's
with
not
dice
he's not
on the
that
end
guy.
of
He's just
his fingers.
Yeah. He's just he's trying to be a race director in a series that is the closest and closest fought and most craziest season that we've seen in a long time. And he made some mistakes, but I think you put anyone in that position and they would have made maybe not the same mistakes, but they would have made a lot of mistakes as well, because man, I can't even imagine trying to, with everyone chirping in my ears and, things like Toto on the last few laps is like, no, Michael, no, we don't need this. No, you can't do this. And it's like, mate, what are you doing? Like, he has to listen to this. I mean, maybe not to that extreme, but he has to listen to that stuff every race for the entire year. And I listened to like 3 comments a race and I'm already fed up and I'm just like, just shut the fuck up. How does he deal with it? So I think, there's, if he does get the boot, I think I could see the reasons why, but I don't think it would be the right decision. I think that's that's making him a scapegoat for something that was maybe a lot larger than him. Last 3. Let's go really, really quick because
I'm hot fire. Let's go.
Max has done an excellent job over the course of the season. This is also from Mark, by the way. Still the 5 question. Third question. Max has done an excellent job over the course of the season, but how will it affect him long term if he is always told he didn't really win that championship? My thoughts.
He won't care.
No, he won't
Max.
care. Exactly.
And he's got Christian behind him telling him not to care.
Yeah. I mean, I don't look at Max and think. Not once have I thought he would care about something like this, because he has the trophy and he has the thing that says Max Verstappen champion. He's not going to care about anyone, regardless of how long, it goes on. That he's going to be like, well, I want it. It says it. You see it?
Yeah.
See where it says?
And I think a lot of people agree as well that this year, if they're in equal cars, Max has been quicker than Lewis. He's outpaced him, I think, in terms of what he's got and what Lewis has got. And most people are convinced of that. So even if it was overturned on that, it's like, well, but then Lewis, if you had to argue, you go, but it's not like, it does a whole luck thing, He didn't luck into it, and then he's not the true winner. You go, you second guess it. You go, no, So he's not. And that's us saying it. It's Max. He'll be fine.
Exactly. Yeah.
He'll be fine.
If it was anyone else, maybe there's argument. But
it's the reason he's there
maybe
for
not
a reason.
Kimmy. I think Kimmy does. Yeah, Kimmy doesn't give a shit. But Kimmy might care less.
He'll just give it back. He'll be like, just take the trophy out. I can't be bothered.
But yeah, no, I think he'll be fine. And I don't think this will be his last championship either. All right, number 4. How many more seasons does Lewis have left in the sport if this is how he gets treated? Like, I can legitimately see him throwing in the towel.
That's not the Lewis way, I don't think. I think he
don't
wants
think
to throw in
so,
the towel
yeah.
now. Or again, this is coming back to that's not what he represents, right? He's so much more than F1. He's a character. He's a role model. All the drivers are role models, yes, but especially Lewis. He's a role model because of the programs that he runs and his his skin color and everything good that he pushes in that sport. So he would never throw in the towel. He's gonna do it at a point where it makes perfect sense for him to do it, right? He's not gonna do it any sooner. He's still fit enough. He's still driving on top of his game more so than he ever has. You'd argue. He's, in the moment, yes, he's going to be like this and that, but that's what every driver does in the moment. Whenever you hear him talk on reflection, whenever he's, had a few days to cool down, he's always, collects himself and, so there's no way he'd do it any sooner than is the right time that makes logical sense for him.
Again, reading another Scott Mitchell article on the race, it's talking about Hamilton's how he reacted to losing the championship after the race, and another really, really good read, but it's just, I'll take one quote, one short sentence where he says, when he finally emerged and faced the cameras, Hamilton's first words were a big congratulations to Max and to his team. And he has every reason to be betrayed and, to fight this and to be, to be a sore loser, basically, because he has every justification to be like, this is not okay. I won't stand for this. And the first words he says are big congratulations to Max, and he congratulates him on the podium. And like, how do you, the mental strength you must have to be able to get out of the car. And, he obviously probably had a few moments to collect his thoughts, but, effectively right after, and to be able to do that after the decisions that have been made against him is, he'll be back. You don't have that much mental strength.
And as well, that this is going to charge him up so much that he's going to come back stronger than he's ever been as well. Mate. If anything, this has charged him into another level of existence,
Yeah, so, I think he'll be in Formula One for as long as he wants to.
You couldn't put a year on it. It's not going to be a year thing. It's going to be a timing thing. It's going to be events and that we can't foresee. But whatever it will be, it will make so much sense that you'll go rest easy, champion. You know what I mean? Like you, for sure. Go and focus on your other things and step out of the spotlight of F1 because you've bloody deserved it.
100%. Yeah. Okay, last one. In the hypothetical universe where the Court of Appeals actually sides with Mercedes, do they hand the championship to Lewis, or do they make Lewis and Max redo the last race? He mentions that he knows it won't happen, but it's funny to think about. And I think there was comments of
think about. Yes,
just go back and it's just them two, and they have to do another 58
Stick them
laps,
both in the Haas around some circuit, see how they do.
This is kind of unprecedented territory. I don't know.
There are no rules that says what's going to happen. That's the point. If this does happen, it's like, that's why it almost needs to go to an exterior party that has other rules about when there's, ruling issues in sports, in finals in general, right? That's why it's a case when Mercedes have an external really good sports lawyer to handle this, because it's not just an F1 thing. It's a sporting case, really. Mm-hmm. It could be any sport in this case where this has happened, where the refs have made a call outside of the rules and the team has been stiffed because of it. You know, it could be anything. Yeah. So we truly, you know, us humble folk,
yeah, no,
you can't say. If they did, then you'd go whoa, but it would be whoa again because it's unprecedented. But if they ruled in their favor but didn't do it, it's yeah, we can't say. I don't know enough about general sporting legal. It's probably a few people that might have a clue. It ain't us, and I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm more so just
people
looking
much
to watch
smarter
it.
than us. Yeah,
I'm getting the popcorn rather than the book out. I don't know about you, but
I'll be honest. I'll be surprised if they give the championship to Lewis. Mainly for the reasons in that those quotes that Chris Medland mentioned earlier, where it's like Red Bull and Verstappen didn't do anything wrong, so how can you take a championship away from them? If they had done something wrong, and they already, you know, with the overtaking over the safety car, which was completely dismissed, and Mercedes aren't even fighting that part at the Court of the Appeals. That was the only thing they could be like, okay, this is how Verstappen gets a penalty. This is how he finishes behind Hamilton. This is how they give Hamilton the championship. They're not pursuing that. They're pursuing stuff against the FIA. It's not against Red Bull and Verstappen. So I don't know how they can take it away from Red Bull and Max to give it to Lewis. But again, that's... Yeah.
And when you put it like that, it still doesn't seem real, does it? The fact that it's lying down to Mercedes versus the FIA. Just that is a concept still to me whenever I think about it. I go, that's really what's happening here. And
that's it.
I just catch myself going, wow, this is the thing that is happening. Whatever the call is made, it's already history, and it's amazing. What a time to be just into this sport.
Yeah.
Just... what a year. If that isn't a sum up for everything that's going on in general, let alone F1. My God.
Regardless of what happened in that final race, regardless of your thoughts of it, it's hard to deny that is quite possibly the most exciting season we've had, at least in the time I've been watching Formula One. I've been watching since 2012. I think you've been watching even longer, but since 2012, I haven't followed a more exciting championship than this year. And what a way to send off the turbo hybrid era with the only non-Mercedes car to win it in the final year of the era.
Yeah, they still wrapped up the constructors, and credit where credit is due. They have made some amazing cars, and
for sure.
Again, this will be more in our roundup, but again, credit to Bottas to still be there to do all that as well. You know what I mean? So it's a But
what
really counts, what everyone cares about is that win that he got, and that's all anyone's going to be talking about, you know.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is going to be one of those things where Verstappen's going to have a 2021 world champion asterisk for a lot lot of people. And
what an asterisk that is. You click it for the comments, and it'll link you to a 1,000-page Wikipedia article. Wow.
Yeah, I am curious to see how this championship is viewed in like 10 years, 5-10 years maybe. Like, will we look back on it and in the same way that it's being looked at now, or will we, you know, over time, will the general public just come to accept that?
That's what I'm excited for, is when in a few years and we're talking back and reflecting and we're going, remember when we were up that night watching that race and that call was made and there's been nothing, regardless of what's happened, you know, Leclerc and Sainz fighting for the championship on the last lap, but I don't know, in I don't know, Argentina or something, and we're still looking back and going, but remember that when that happened. We're in it right now, but you just know it's
for sure. Oh well, we should wrap it up. That went. I'm not surprised.
Even talking about it has just blown my brain again, and it's just dead again. You want to get a good night's sleep? Just talk about F1 and what happened, and you just be like, "Oh, I need to lie down."
We're gonna wrap it up there. Our next video is gonna be, we're gonna talk about the season review. We're gonna cover, you know, basically everything but Abu Dhabi. I think we've talked enough about Abu Dhabi. If you have any questions you want us to answer at the the season at large or just Formula One in general, feel free to leave them in the comments, or you can tweet them at us at is it Final Sector YT? I forget. I'll put it on screen. I forget our tag. But you can tweet it at us, put it in the comments. This is fun. We're looking to get back into making more videos soon. This season review one's probably going to be I haven't really planned ahead of that one, so we'll see how we go. But yeah, stay tuned for that one. I want to thank everyone that gave us questions. Hopefully we can get a few more. If you're new here and you like the content, feel free to subscribe. I promise they're not all this long. I'm really trying to make them not this long.
You will, yeah. Maybe it won't be. Maybe we'll trim out all the gap. You never know.
It wasn't. Yeah. Anyway, we'll see. Thanks for watching. We'll see you for the next video. Cheers.
Catch ya.